We have John Hagen here, hybrid, so online on Zoom as well as here in person at Aquila Space. I have a few announcements at the end, but if anyone has any questions during the talk, they can add it to the chat and I'll relay those questions. Or if anyone here in person has questions, then just kind of raise your hand and ask as we go. So I will just leave it over to John now.
Hey, welcome and thank you guys for showing up to my talk. And like I'm going to be addressing my computer and the people here as well. Gonna jump right in and start sharing my screen. And first of all, I just want to say that this talk is actually inspired by this guy. This is me when I was about 10 years old. This is probably the moment that I really got into photography. Um, while I was living in Haines, Alaska, we did this. There was this. There's a lot of bald eagles there. If you guys are familiar with Haines, Alaska, there was and at this point there was the Bald Eagle Festival was rocking pretty good, and I saw at one of the local gift shops that they were doing a bald eagle photo contest, and I am super excited that my parents and my dad uh, felt that he just entertained me when I said I wanted to enter the bald eagle photo contest with the little Canon Sure Shot point and shoot camera that we had. Um, I like this one. This is an amazing, this is probably the best photo that got made that day. Um, it was me pointing at a very tiny bald eagle. I think you can kind of see it. I need to hit okay. Don't see if I can get that bar to leave. Okay. So the exciting thing he let me fail at photography, which is probably the single greatest um, skill that you could learn as a photographer, especially if you're learning with film, is giving yourself permission to fail and to photograph over and over and again. I can't think of how many rolls of film that I've wasted, or not wasted, but had not turned out the way I hadn't initially planned to do that. And that was what that little 10-year-old guy learned, and what I have taken to me as the adult me. A little bit about me. I learned how to learn about photography as a photojournalist. I studied photojournalism at University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did a couple internships around Alaska and beyond, and including at the Anchorage Daily News. And I worked as a newspaper photojournalist for about 7 years as a staff photographer, and a few years after that as a freelance photographer. It's exciting. I'm glad I got to do it when I was young. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure the one thing I have always brought some of the things I've learned as a photojournalist and all the photography I've done. I like to work quick. I like working with the world that's around me as opposed to setting things up and making things up. But I'm okay just kind of being that proverbial fly on the wall and learning about what's going on. And what did I do? Come on, little guy, you can do this. Oh yeah, sorry. One thing I worked a lot in the evenings and worked on the weekends, which meant I photographed a lot of sports. So not that sports photography is it's what I do now or anything like that, but it gave me a volume of photography to practice on, and gave me a sense for anticipation, lining things up. It's kind of fun seeing these photos now, looking back there. This was made in about 2007, and digital photography has come a long way since then. And I can looking at the grain and the photo and things like that. It's kind of like, man, I wish I had a new camera back then. Would have been fun. So I guess I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that I've done more recently and what I'm continuing to try and do. I do a lot of I've done a lot of landscape work in my recent, and this is these are a couple images from a series of on about the Chilkat Beach, which is a little 1.5 mile long stretch of beach outside of Haines, Alaska. And the reason I started photographing here is I actually put in for one of those Rasmussen Individual Artist Fellowships, and I was rejected. Once again, kind of circling back to that. I one of the pieces of advice that I was given was to work on a larger body of work. And one thing I wanted to do is I was wondering if you could help me kind of get rid of, I have a little weird box in there. I'll see if I can push that out of the way. I realize that that's what folks online might be seeing, so.
No, we can't see it.
Oh, oh, you can't?
No, no.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's-
it's up on here. Sorry about here. So, oh, it's John. I'm John Hagen. I'm talking. So it's where was I going? I wanted to start working on a little bit of a project, and this project started off as a sort of photo a day thing. I found myself on a certain stretch of the beach every day walking my dog, which I have to say is the single best photo accessory I've come in contact with in my life is a dog. Somebody being to help get me outside every single day to for whatever reason, whether it be rain or shine. Thank you, buddy. But I started trying to make photos every day in this one spot. And I found that it was an amazing process to be able to do that. It was, I think there's Robert Capa once always said, if you're not getting good photos, you're not close enough. It's easy to think of that as being physically close to your subjects, but it also means you have to be able to get to know your subjects. And one way of doing that is photograph every day in the same spot. What was amazing is how things change, and like how I started getting attuned to all the little things in the spot, like little bits of light. And it's what I pretty much there's some pretty huge mountains that are around this beach, and I found myself not being as interested in the mountains around the Chilkat Mountains and the such along this riverbank. This is one of them. This is one of my favorite photos to actually print digitally. It was so much fun to try and make that jam, make it look like on a piece of paper the way I saw it in my head. I know I just said I wasn't really looking at the mountains in this area and looking at those small quiet things, but then immediately going to that. But I found myself photographing in like pretty miserable conditions. Like this isn't necessarily, it doesn't look bad, but this is like one of those days that is incredibly windy and very cold, and that's the moon, and it's dark, mostly dark. It's a full moon, so but out before sunset, and it's an amazing little weird moment that happened there. But I found myself finding the little small moments that happen on this beach as more than the larger things. I found myself photographing with the idea of making black and white prints as well with this, partially because of Southeast Alaska being monochromatic and on its own. Like it's cloudy and it's kind of a little dark, and everything is mostly black and white and blue. So it's really easy to see things that way. But I found myself looking for all the weird little changes that happened. Like this is a crack in the ice that right after the first snowfall, or during this first snowfall, actually, starting to fill up with snow. And um and there's these amazing photos where you don't really know which way is up and which way is down, and so disorienting, and just like like realizing with a larger body of work you can like play with these kind of prints and make people wonder what the heck is going on. If any of you guys want me to kind of go back and look at some of the, like, linger a little bit longer, we can as well. Also, I'm pretty informal, and I have a pretty I might save some of the online questions till a little later on, unless they're really pointed. But if any of you guys have questions or comments, feel free to point, jump up. Um, this was this little stretch of beach has a lot of tide in it, and the tide comes and goes, and in addition to the weather changing everything, the where the water is changes like hourly, minutely, actually. And when it's like this, you could actually sit there and watch the tide coming in over whatever you're looking at. Um, like this sort of thing is one of the photo that I like making from there. Just things how the weather changes. Like this would probably been like in for some of us are in, I know some of us are in Alaska and some of us aren't, but the in Haines the temperature swings pretty wildly through the winter. So one day it'll be raining and one day it will be frozen solid, and another day it'll be raining and or snowing 3 feet of snow or something like that. It's a bit crazy. Um, but it gives you like you could walk the same stretch of beach every day and it's different. So these are beach greens, actually. I know they're black and white, but they're beach greens. Um, yeah, I was amazed at how I realized I was looking down too much in all of these photos. It kind of gives you a little bit of an aerial perspective, but also, um, yeah, sometimes it like the if the you can't really, if it's cloudy, this is likely an overcast day, so it kind of forces you to look a lot closer and look at what's around you as opposed to looking off in the distance. Yeah, these are all digital. I photographed digitally in color originally because it gives you a lot more information to print in black and white. So yeah, start off in color and then current. I photograph in color with the intent of making these black and white images.
Did you make the change to digital?
Digital from film. Actually, it was I photographed when I started working at the News Miner in the 2000. Mostly uh, because I got paid to start using a digital camera. Um, but the big reason I made the switch was when I moved to Haines, Alaska. I wanted to start printing black and white and shooting black and white and shooting film, but it was really hard to get the chemistry into town. A little harder to ship it by mail, but also just trying to make sure I'm treating like I didn't want to just dump the chemistry in down the drain, or I want to make sure I'm recycling things, and it was a lot harder to do in Haines. So I'm back moving to Haines in 2011 kind of locked the digital side in for me. I keep threatening to start shooting film, and I have a couple of film cameras that I want to start using, but I just haven't made the switch back to experiment around.
What time period is this?
This is these guys are 2014 to 15. So yeah.
I'm noticing a lot of like I know this area is an estuary, right?
Yeah,
At the end of the braided glacial river, and I'm noticing a lot of like patterns that are river-like, but not.
you like that? Thank you. It is like in that 2 mile stretch, like you can go from mostly being like an Alaskan beach to being an estuary. Like it's a very unique spot. Same beach, probably like maybe actually 200 feet away. Just suddenly you're getting to clams and clamshells, and I like looking for little, like paying attention to little secret things like that in my photos. Little hidden quiet moments. I've heard my photos described as quiet a couple of times, and um, it's probably a very quiet photo. This is also that, like, this is that exciting, the fun part about having the newer digital cameras where you can flip the screens out. So you can stick your camera in weird spots and actually be able to make compositions. Um, Going for off your question about like when I made the switch to digital, I kind of made two switches in digital. I started mostly shooting in with digital, gosh, in the aughts, but kind of right about the time I started this project, I switched to using little smaller digital cameras like Micro Four Thirds cameras. Um, Mostly because I found myself not taking my large Nikon DSLR out and using that much. Like it was such a heavy beast, and I realized I was starting to get in the way of my photography, and so I found that once I got a small one of the little Micro Four Thirds cameras, I started making a lot more photos, and I'd start packing my camera around a lot more and more. So um, I like the much smaller mirrorless cameras that are out there, mostly because I can mostly have one wherever I want. Have a really capable setup in a camera bag that's about the size of a football. One thing I really I seek is photos that from the really unique place in Alaska. Um, like I look for places that kind of could look like they could have been made anywhere, that remind people of other places where they are, or lakes or things from their childhood. I like looking for like places that make Alaska seem like it's connected to the rest of the world as opposed to um, its own unique thing. Always looking for shapes. I yeah, I don't know why I like this photo. It was it's a spot that I photograph and rephotograph over and over. Like if I went back to Haynes, the same spot, I would make this photo again. I realize I probably should make a triptych of the photos I've made there, but Shellcat River, Talking Ridge. For some of these quiet moments. I mean, this is one of those photos I made from by having that small camera with me. This is in Haynes. We have had a tendency to get these either storms from the south or storms from the north. Storms from the north were really cold and miserable, like that photo that had the moon in it. Um, and this is a storm that's coming out of the south, which also brings a lot of rain, which really kind of isn't really. It's not super exciting, not super pretty out, but you can if you bring a camera out in the really gnarly weather, there's fun photos to be made. It's one of my favorite times to photograph in storms when with that changing weather. So on those, I don't like how the if you can see the upper part of it, you can sort of see how it there's a little bit more of a curve up there. So it's like I kept photographing around the Chilkat River. I built on I did the Chilkat Beach series and put that together as part of a couple shows. And what I wanted to do after that is there's still a lot more cool things to photograph around the Chilkat River. I started photographing up and down the river, trying to get away from that just that 2 mile stretch of river. I wanted to go up and down the river looking for different photos. The body of work I put together was somewhat inspired by this idea of I was thinking of a raven looking for food on the Chilkat River. But once I started thinking about this body of work in that way, it kind of broke me from looking as close focusing it gave me a chance to explore a little bit different perspectives in the space, and work a little bit more aerially. This is the Chilkat River. It's a a area of the river that's a flood a tidal plain, and those are the shadows of mountains that are there. Thank you. This is photographed from a plane, not a drone. The magical words for anybody photographing is if you know somebody that has a plane, when they say, "Do you want to come up and take pictures from my plane?" I found. Yes.
Photographs, the pilot, I made the mistake of using a telephoto lens and moving it when I was in the plane. And when I got out of the plane, I couldn't move for 4 hours. I was so sick.
Oh.
Moving the telephoto lens forward and back. That just made me feel
Motion. Oh man. I mean, even you get a little bit if you stare out of the stealth of your camera, even with a wide angle lens, that happens. This is a beaver that had a window you could roll down, and so leaning out the window of a plane and giving yourself frostbite in the middle of summertime is a little bit counterproductive, but you can make some photos. This is from the same river, same spot with a little different part of tide and different time of the year. Between now and here, there's this is probably when it's been sunny for a really long time and hasn't been raining for a while, and this is a lot of rain, a little bit of tide. These are northwestern crows. Lots of them. Thank you. What I noticed is on my this is actually jumping back to the Chilkat Beach again. What they do, kind of a cool thing I noticed about these crows in Haines, they come to town in the morning, and then in the evening they go roost all together in one spot. So sometime around sunrise, they come from this one spot. I believe they're coming from a place called Pyramid Harbor, which is kind of across the Chilkat River from Haines, and they fly over Pyramid Island, and then they go to terrorize the city of Haines. But I was lucky one morning to catch them when they were coming to town. It was a great one of the darndest things I'd seen. It's like always have to have your camera on you. That's one of my photo professors from UAF beat that lesson into me a while ago. Fortunately, I have a cell phone that has a really great camera on it now, so I don't have to always have a camera on me. But I think what the show when I showed this when I called it "Looking for Fish," and I was actually looking at small like salmon fry that were in this tidal pool, and I realized that after I liked the print, I liked how it came together when I printed. I couldn't find the fish in here, and I don't think there are fish in here, but really made a fun title, made everybody look for the fish in the photo. Looking for those different things that happen in weather changes. Like looking at this photo, I realized that I don't think it would be without that little dusting of snow. Like I don't think this photo would be what it is. But I know back when I used to print a lot more in a darkroom. I remember the old photo assignment of how do you print a black and white picture or an egg and have it look like something. Like that's one of the challenges of how do you make a print of snow and have it look like something. This is one of my more challenging pictures to try and hang. In times when I've sent this body of work out to be hung by other people, this photo gets hung upside down a lot. I was a little bit surprised. This is the right way. It's a reflection of all their trees in the river, and then there's the bank at the top. But for some reason, like, yeah, feel like I had it hanging in a show, and I came back to the show at one point and had somebody flipped it over on me. Like, I don't, I was there, it was wired up. I don't know how they got around to make it happen, but I was like, oh, I know this show. I was went through some effort and like I had was hanging the photos from a wire because I was feeling really proud of how I printed my work at that point. So I didn't want the frames to be in the way, and it was a really small gallery, so there really wasn't room to have the frames up. So to get more photos up, I hung them on on a stainless steel wire that I had set up. But I came back to the show halfway through the run, and somebody had unclipped it and flipped it over. Like, this is the sister image to there's earlier we showed you a picture of like a crack in the ice that had been filled up with snow, and this is a crack in the ice that had filled up with dirt or sand, silt that was like the glacial silt. Um, so a lot of my work is tied to uh, some of my work, especially in Hagen, is tied to this one body of water. And water shows up in my work a lot. I did an artist residency in Santa Fe at Institute of American Indian Arts. And the project I put together for that was I wanted to do a landscape project, but I wanted to kind of explore the place in a different way. And I started off by being really curious about that area. And I think the first day I was there, I got so thirsty because Santa Fe is a desert. But I started wanting to look for bodies of water and kind of experience Santa Fe kind of in that same way I had done in Haines, like looking for water and looking for how it changed day to day. And Santa Fe, like I said, is a desert. And when I saw a blue streak of graphic on the Google Maps, I was kind of shocked by what I found when I went there. Sometimes I could actually see the water running through the photos. Sometimes I couldn't. But the one thing that what I found when I was doing that body work is like, af like after being in a pretty pristine place and experiencing a place oftentimes as being the only person for miles around, like in Haines or in Alaska, like everywhere I looked, there was signs of people and everything was accounted for in the lower 48, which was a different way for me to experience the world. Like, so I, rather than kind of try and fight my way through that, which was what I would have done, I just sort of leaned into it. Like every photo from this series has a human element. Some of them are pretty obvious, some aren't. This one is, there's that large stump that's in the middle of the photo. This is one of the more low-key bodies of water that I found. Like you can see, I want to say that isn't even water off to the right. That's just a darker patch on the sandy river. But in addition to the bridge in this photo, this river bottom or creek bottom had been used, there's footprints all around it. Sometimes they could see little things like this, and realizing I looked down too much in my photos and kind of used my height to give myself a little bit of an aerial perspective. But and sometimes the water didn't always look like water. Sometimes that's a dam at one point. Dam, and then there beyond that is a little bit of a riverbed. Like in New Mexico, a lot of times when you see trees, that means there's water there. And sometimes the water was not as wild looking as you would expect. Sometimes this is actually at that same dam complex, and there was a little bit of a hydro project around it, but like it just at some point that's kind of how I felt when I was looking around as part of this. Like I felt the water and the what I would usually have easy access to when I was in Alaska, I had very little access to it, and I felt like I was walled off of a lot of places. But others kind of are pretty amazing. New Mexico is a pretty amazing place to photograph if you're looking for a place to practice. The light's pretty dynamic. It's the weather is pretty consistent there, and and the food's amazing. Ansel Adams photograph there. It's, I, in addition to water, for me, like I'm always looking for exciting light and doing amazing things. I'm not showing a lot of Anchorage photos, but I'm struck by the light that's here. Some pretty amazing skies too. Like I don't think I've experienced skies anywhere else in Alaska like there are in Anchorage. It's a very interesting space. So this is outside of New Mexico or Santa Fe, New Mexico. This is I forget. This is between Santa Fe and Albuquerque. The name slips my mind. It's a dam on the Rio Grande. I was showing this photo to some students at II, and they pointed out that this is one of the most polluted rivers in America. This spot in particular being a one of the first dams below Los Alamos. So it's an interesting part of that. Like in some ways I didn't realize why it felt so foreboding and prohibiting, I guess. You know, I think in one of my artist statements I have, it's probably something I need to exercise and kind of get out of there and try and move beyond. But I keep saying people, place, and the interaction between the two are the inspiration for my work. Um, this is one of the few times where you can actually see people in my work. I realize in this particular body of work. Um, yeah, there's that weird creek that's through in the middle here, and yeah, I as I described before, my background was in photojournalism, and I also I really enjoy street photography and kind of seeing what's out there and what like little slices of life. But being living in rural Alaska, there's a lot of people. I have a small project where I photographed people of Haines called People of the Haines, and that was a fun project to work on. But um, sometimes in the absence of people, you kind of you can bring that idea of street photography to the wild places around Alaska, like just photographing what's there and exploring the ordinary. Doesn't quite fit this photo. This is kind of the photo of the anti-Rio Grande. And this is, like I said, I was just looking for like places I could drive to in around the Santa Fe area and looking for what would like a blue line on the map that would and mark a body of water. And sometimes there wasn't a much of a body of water. I had to drive up and down this thing before I found something that was water. Um, Other times it's a little bit more obvious. Depending on what your screen looks like. This is one of those ones I wish I could have show you printed up, but it's one of the challenges of showing photos on a screen versus on a print. On like one reason I really enjoy making prints is you can have a lot more control over how it's seen. I'm realizing that looks very different from my screen, and then probably looks a lot different from the screens of everybody out there in the world. But like I said, this has every photo in the Santa Fe series has a human element to it, and this one, the human element is that big line across the middle, the line between light and dark, and that's from the bridge that I'm standing on. Road. Like I said, everywhere that this one wasn't about as much about the body of water that was just over the bend, but it was about the fact that like you need to get large trees in this area, there is water somewhere there. And yeah, this is I forget this is the Santa Fe River. That's what this is. And this is a little further upstream, kind of that there was a weird lock system or dam system that was on this river. And canals. Oh, I think I had whole another one. I'll go through this one a little bit quicker. This is was one of my most recent projects I've done. And this was in 2000. These photos I made in 2000 and 2001. Or no, 2020 and 2021. I'm missing a 20 in there. But this was it set out to photograph make photos in the village that my family is from, a small village in Bristol Bay called Ugashik. Actually I started in 2019 and then 2020. is when I made these photos. I had planned to go out there and fish for the summer in 2019, and there's going to be two parts of this series. One was going to be like landscape photos like this, and then which were going to be deliberately in black and white, and then a series of portraits in color tied to it, because I wanted to kind of explore life in this place. This would be a much larger village than it is, but the Spanish flu wiped out most of the people that lived there. I think one of my aunts had told me my grandma was one of 3 people that survived in the village. So in some ways, it feels like it's a really old and quiet place. But in some ways, it's a really powerful place. If you leave something in one spot, it goes away. It gets, the land will eat things. It's a pretty dynamic spot. Kind of the crazy thing that happened though in between in that 2019, I made a lot of photos in 1 week there, and then I fell and broke my arm, and I had to go home, and I couldn't be out there for the rest of the year. I'm really glad that I made photos, like I was not going to be able to make photos for a couple weeks or after that. But what ended up happening in 2020 was the pandemic struck, and I went back out to make photos and to fish, and I had to scrap that whole portrait side of things because that was the time when you're actively trying to not see people. But it was really powerful to go back to this spot that is somewhat had been shaped by a pandemic before, and think about it again, like as it was there was actively a pandemic happening. So these photos are really quiet that way. But in some ways, the life is kind of hidden in these. The boats, these are set net skiffs. We're actively using those. But this is an old abandoned cabin. Looking for those little bits of life that are happening in there. Wish I could get rid of that green and black bar up there, green and red bar up there, but low-key photo of the changes that happened in the river. Apparently the mud wasn't always in this spot, and it's kind of the really thick and soupy mud. Like I feel like would be similar to the Turnagain arm mud here. And we were trying to fish through that stuff. They made really cool black and white photos, so I wasn't super worried about it. This is an old basketball court that had been made, which is the funny thing is for me, like I was returning to UGAT. I had been in UGASHIC like 20 years ago when I was a freshman in college, and this was new. Like they had some grant money to set up a basketball court, and we set this up. So it was fun, crazy visiting this spot. It was not being used as a basketball court anymore, but seeing how, like, in that little bit of time, how things kind of get absorbed by land. Wood in this area is a pretty precious resource, so you hold on to any little bit you can, and either use it for projects or to feed the sauna. This is that if you leave anything there, it'll just get sucked. The grass will just sort of eat it in a way. Like the grass is so like I think must be the volcanic ash that's in the area, plus just the immense amount of sun that's there, that it's almost like a jungle. This is more of that. I started to look at, I was really drawn to this these buildings like this that were slowly, like the nails start slowly working out of the out of any of the wood that's there. You need to always be need to keep things warm, and you need to keep to dry them out, and you need to always be maintaining things out there. Between the weather and the constant wind. As I was photographing, there was a kind of a repeated element of a felt like there was repeated elements of a cross that came through in those photos. So the name I came up with this series was the sound of wind in the grass, which was the one of the weirdest sensations being out there. Like it was coming from Southeast Alaska, then coming through Anchorage, which is a pretty loud place, and landing out in Western Alaska, like all you could hear is the sound of wind in the grass. It was that's my grandpa's skiff. So it's interesting. It was fun to look for ideas, like look for these old signs of life. Then in some ways, there are also signs of prosperity as well. Like when fishing was a little bit different, and like the weirdest thing about Western Alaska, and I wanted to tease into this a little bit more or work around this, was like that it's kind of so frantic out there in the summer that if you need something, you bring it out. Like, but if it's something breaks, you just park it and walk away from it, and because you have to get something new to keep fishing or keep going, and whether that be for um to get through the winter or to get through the summer for fishing or to make money or to put up enough fish to get by. Like sometimes you sometimes to just take advantage of that short run of fish that happens. And that was it. I'll leave that up there. So that's it for the full slideshow. Does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
What is the final form of these photos? Do you print and exhibit them? Can you do that at your job there?
So really the final form is printing them and showing them. Um, I haven't really shown them that often. It's a little harder to show with given my current job. So I've been looking to do more printing, kind of re-experiment how I can print and how I work with my photos. I've been experimenting with alternative process printing, going from digital to like cyanotype. And once I figure that, I really want to do platinum printing, but that's a little pricey to just experiment with.
What sort of lens?
That's a really good question. So for the first part of the Chilkat River series, I actually found myself I limited the lenses that I used. I had for my little the setup I had a 20 millimeter lens and a 45 millimeter lens. So it was a, a normal lens and a short telephoto lens. So I don't go too crazy with my lenses. For the longest time, I used just a set of prime lenses, like in that micro four thirds, like a 12 millimeter, a 35, or the 17 millimeter, 45, and a 75. And then there was one of the little kit zooms at the 7300 zoom lens, like one of the little cheap ones that I got for free, which was so surprisingly sharp. Now I've like using a kind of a room broom zoom lens. So a small lens that I found myself switching between those primes way too much.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yep.
You can hear?
Any more
It's
questions?
Charles.
Yeah.
So you break up your photos here by place, or how you think of, do you think of your photos as bodies of work that start and end in a certain place, as an ongoing, like, how do you break up your body of work?
That's a good question. I think for these ones, I would just kind of break them up by place. In my head, this is just a finished body of work. I could see myself expanding the Chill Cat series if I had a really specific idea with that. But later on, I might go revisit them to tell other stories with those. But yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, there's a couple projects I'm kind of cooking on here that aren't tied to a place as much. But that's an easy way to compartmentalize, especially if you travel around a lot. So I did say I really do enjoy making um, making places in Alaska seem familiar to anywhere else, something that could be made in other places. Oh, wow.
There's bushing.
Oh. Did I accidentally draw a line on there? That's kind of crazy. Oh, I didn't know I can annotate. That's kind of, sorry.
What is your process for developing ideas?
One thing I really like left to my own devices, I'll just make photos, and then I'm always revisiting the old photos that I've made. And sometimes I'll find themes and stories that tie there, or as I'm going around, I'll come up with new ideas. So I'm going along. I always keep notes about things that I experience as well, and things that I read and I hear. And every once in a while, there's something that comes up, that like a quote that resonates or a idea that resonates. Ideas are gold. That's kind of the crazy thing. Like sometimes I'll make sure I write stuff down, but like I have a few notebooks. I'm the king of making half-used notebooks. That I can't throw them away because they all have great ideas, but yeah, just sometimes I'll see ideas or jot notes or make sketches and go from there. But yeah, idea generation as a whole, that's a fun thing. Any other questions coming from there? Okay. Any other questions from here? Is there?
Good question. Pretty overwhelmed by the image. Very nice with it.
Oh, thank you.
I've seen a bit of your work over the years, but not this much. And I'm really happy to see you do this presentation.
You have any prints on display?
I don't. I was thinking I wasn't sure what the setup was going to be here today, so I was going to bring some in, but I don't have any up right now. But happy to show if anybody wants to check them out.
Did you bring something?
I didn't bring any. I should. Yeah, it's something I'm really curious if there's like a something in Anchorage where people like check out portfolios or share portfolios. Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. We're going to do something here.
So have you had an opportunity to do very much work on the tournament?
I've done a fair amount. Yeah, I should get out there more. Yeah,
Saw so much similarity between that and children.
it's hard to get out there. Scared of drivers in town. It's a really, I suppose that's one of the most the greatest challenge is getting that access to the spaces. And maybe maybe it's a bike or something like that, but like, it's a lot of, it's, I want to make more photos down there. I also haven't photographed a white raven. I kind of still need to make that happen. Or imagine how the white raven is experiencing the world. I think that might be a more fun photo series. Cool. Any other questions? If not, I'll just mute.